Strolling through a flea market in a faraway land, you come across a peculiar stand selling what seems to be puzzle boxes. You begin to toy with one, amused at its ingenuity, but soon your eyes land on a particular puzzle box kept in a glass case behind the counter, far out of reach of curious grasping hands. Asking the vendor about the peculiar item, his eyes light up as he looks you up and down for a moment before smiling, an act that leaves you rather unnerved. The vendor agrees to sell you the box at a deep discount, telling you that you're the perfect customer for it. Taking the box home, you begin to fiddle with it and discover that pieces of it can be moved around and reconfigured. Suddenly, you've solved the puzzle and the box leaps out of your hands and rearranges into a brand new configuration. And then from the darkness in the corner of your room, you hear the rattling of chains and the deep moaning of something horrific. Standing before you is the fiend of pain and pleasure, the legendary Pinhead, along with his host of Cenobites, and they have promised that your suffering will be legendary, even in hell. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics U-Versus. Today we're putting you up against the Leviathan's chief architect of pain, Pinhead. Pinhead was once a man like you and I, albeit one tragically scarred by the experiences of World War I. A soldier serving with the Allies, Elliot Spencer witnessed the horrors and carnage of trench warfare, horrors that sucked the joy of life out of him. His mind broken by the atrocities he had seen, he became disenchanted with life, and in a desperate bid to feel something again, anything, he engaged in a globe-hopping expedition to seek out every form of carnal gratification he could think of, and yet he still hungered for something more. Eventually, he discovered the Lament configuration, a puzzle box designed by a brilliant engineer over 200 years ago and infused with dark magic. When properly arranged, the box opens an interdimensional portal to the realm of hell, Kingdom of Leviathan. Dragged into hell, Spencer was subjected to every pleasure and torture imaginable, and eventually transformed into the Cenobite known as Pinhead, when his soul and that of Toktek, a Mayan prince, merged together. So you've accidentally summoned an interdimensional entity who's now hell-bent on flaying the skin from your flesh while torturing you with every possible pain and pleasure in all of creation for eternity. How are you going to defeat it? First, you have to know your enemy, and the most important thing to remember about Pinhead is that despite his appearance and his origins in the dimension of hell, he's not in fact a demon. Pinhead is instead a Cenobite, a twisted abomination created by the merging of Captain Spencer's and Totek's souls, and then infused with living flesh. This is an important distinction to make because while true faith can be a powerful weapon against a demon, it's going to be completely useless against Pinhead or his Cenobite cohorts. Holy water and other holy artifacts may be deadly against a demon, but they won't do anything against Pinhead, save for very quickly getting you horrifically maimed. As for powers and abilities, Pinhead has quite a few tricks to call on. First, he's very resistant to physical damage, not completely immune, but highly resistant. Because Pinhead manifests physically in our world, he's bound like any other entity that takes on corporeal form by the rules of the prime material plane. That means that Pinhead can be shot, stabbed, and even exploded. Although, as mentioned, he does have incredible vitality and is supernaturally difficult to physically hurt. Plus, there's the simple fact that Pinhead can deal with pain extremely well. He has spent 100 years exploring every pain and pleasure imaginable. His body has been tortured in every way you can think of, and his mind has evolved to turn pain into pleasure. Hurting Pinhead isn't going to slow him down much, and while he sticks a few chained hooks into your flesh, trying to return the favor is only going to get his rocks off, so to speak. The chain hooks are another thing we should bring up, as they're definitely one of Pinhead's favorite weapons. Pinhead has the ability to tap into the Well of Midnight at any time, manifesting its malevolent energy as iron chains tipped with barbed hooks. The chains are frequently used to string up victims and immobilize them in preparation for transport to hell, or in preparation for their eternity of suffering. The chains can also be used defensively though, with Pinhead calling upon them to shield himself from attacks of other supernatural beings. They can bind a target completely, lift them into the air, or simply strike from multiple directions at once to tear flesh and wear down a target from blood loss and pain. It seems that Pinhead feeds off his victims' sufferings, and so the more he can inflict on them, the more powerful he becomes. Lastly, Pinhead has an almost omnipotent ability to know every emotional and physiological problem you've ever had in your life. He knows of every disappointment, every tragedy, and every moment of abuse you've ever suffered. He understands exactly what will hurt you the most psychologically or emotionally, and sometimes his torture is not physical at all, but rather emotional. In fact, some of his victims are dragged to hell not to suffer physical tortures, but rather to endure emotional and psychological tortures, forced to relive the most horrible moments of their lives, or thrust into nightmare possibilities where they live through horrifically traumatic events over and over into eternity. It's not clear, but it's believed that eventually when a victim's soul has been thoroughly defeated this way, the victim is eventually turned into a Cenobite under Pinhead's command, or operating on their own to perpetuate human misery. So how are you going to take on the Prince of Pain and Pleasure? With its ability to know what hurts you most emotionally, conjure chains and hooks out of thin air, and to resist most physical damage, this isn't going to be an easy fight. First, your mind is your best weapon, only in this case it's Pinhead's best weapon. He's a patient guy. He doesn't need to come swinging right out of the gate and rip you to shreds with his mystical chains and hooks. Instead, Pinhead will haunt you from the shadows, calling upon your worst emotional and psychological traumas. Perhaps he will force you to live through some of these memories all over again, all with the purpose of breaking down your will. This strengthens Pinhead, and some victims can be so defeated that they simply give in to the physical torture that comes next. So you're gonna have to make sure you've got a good grasp on your noggin. If something haunts you from your past, let it go. Take some yoga classes and do some self-help therapy. Vent out your most painful experiences with a professional who can help you sort them out. That's not just good advice on insulating yourself against Pinhead's manipulation, but it's good advice for daily life. So you've made peace with your inner demons and now they serve you instead of Pinhead. That's one big step forward in this battle royale. Now it's going to come down to fisticuffs, or, well, not that, because you really don't want to get into a boxing match with a guy that has sharpened pins all over the face you'll be punching. Next up, you're going to want to find a way to protect yourself from Pinhead's primary weapon, those flying chains with the nasty little hooks on the end. Pinhead's going to be wanting to stick those everywhere on your body, and we do mean everywhere. So you'd best not give him the chance. You're going to want to get your hands on the chainmail shark-proof suit from hahahaahhh Slimmer, designer of shark-proof suits for underwater biologists for the last 4 decades. The suit features a fine weave stainless steel mesh along with the helmet. The suit's sleeves, bottom of the tunic, and boots all extend under the upper layer to give you double-layered protection in several vital areas. Rated to withstand a shark bite short of a great white shark, the shark suit will make you pretty much invulnerable to Pinhead's dreaded chain attacks. And at only $7,500, it's quite a steal. The suit does leave your face exposed, however, but a simple medieval-style face mask made of steel will take care of that problem. With your full body suit making you impervious to Pinhead's hook and chain attacks, and your iron will making you equally impervious to his attempts to manipulate you emotionally, this just leaves the problem of actually defeating Pinhead. As we mentioned, Pinhead is extremely resistant to physical damage. Even the most powerful assault rifles aren't going to have much effect. Cenobites are only seriously injured by other supernatural beings, and even if you manage to, say, blow Pinhead up, he'll simply reform back in hell and come back later to finish you off. You don't want to give him that opportunity. But you also can't kill him, and you don't want him escaping back into hell until you eventually really have to pee and take off your chain link shark suit. Once more, we're gonna turn to science, only this time it's the science of magnetism that we're turning to. Pinhead's head is embedded with dozens of metal pins, and it's well known that his body is host to many piercings, some of them in very uncomfortable places. We think it's time to turn Pinhead's love for heavy metal back at him, so you're gonna have to get your hands on a junkyard electromagnetic crane. Naturally occurring magnets aren't powerful enough to lift up huge slabs of steel, but wrap an iron core with wires and run a current through, and voila! You can create a powerful electromagnet that can lift cars. For you though, you're gonna use the electromagnet without the crane. Simply bury the magnet in the floor or perhaps inside a wall where you'll be summoning Pinhead. And when he arrives, let him do his hooks and chains thing for giggles. Remember, you're safely sitting inside your shark-proof suit. When he's worn himself out trying to rip you apart, simply press a switch to run the electricity through the magnet, and voila! The metal in all of Pinhead's piercings and pins will trap him up against the magnet, rendering him completely helpless. What you do from here is, well, kinda tricky. Pinhead doesn't need to eat and drink, and you can't keep the magnet on forever because the electrical medical bill will bankrupt you in no time at all. Plus, if there's ever a blackout, well, you're gonna have one very pissed off Pinhead coming after you. And the odds are you won't be in your shark suit when he does. So, we've done it before when you were fighting the evil doll Chucky, and we'll do it again. You're gonna have to transport Pinhead to the bottom of the sea, somewhere that nobody can stumble across him ever again, and set him free to torment humanity once more. As usual, our supernatural evil dumping ground is going to be Litki Deep in the Arctic Ocean, which reaches a depth of 17,881 feet. Just chain Pinhead up nice and tight and dump him overboard. If you remember from our You vs. Chucky video, we chose this spot because there's very little chance of any fisherman accidentally snagging one of our evil villains with his nets and dragging them back up to the surface. With Pinhead safely in the bottom of the ocean for a few hundred years minimum, you're free to finally hop out of your shark suit and take a breather. However, if you've been following along in this series, then you've probably already dumped Chucky down there too, in which case you should probably always be cautious about what goes bump in the dark around you. There's no telling what the lead Cenobite and an evil murderous doll may get up to if allowed to plan together. How would you defeat Pinhead? Where would your designated evil dude dumping ground be? And if you like our You vs. series, make sure you check out our You vs. playlist. Do it now. I'm waiting.